This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. It's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we have a very important program for you, because all of our programs are. We're an information and knowledge company. We have nothing to sell except knowledge, information, and wisdom. So the question I have for all of you this morning is this, is how do you know when a politician is lying? Well, the answer is when their lips are moving.
Yeah.
And as you know, there's a lot of lips moving everywhere in the world today. And as you know, the one thing about the Rich Dad Company, we just like to get to the facts, Jack. You know, what are the facts, ma'am? Now, don't give me the story. Don't wag your lips. And so today, you know, a hot topic obviously is, you know, President Trump is talking about a tax cut to benefit the middle class. And everybody's saying that's a bunch of lips moving. Also, we have Germany. They're having trouble out there. And Germany is the engine for the EU and the Euro. And also we have Bitcoin raging through the roof right now. And I think they're all connected. So today we have a person who understands the most important part, because the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad is really not about a rich dad or a poor dad, but it's really a book on accounting, income, expenses, assets, and liabilities. And as you know, 99% of most people don't have a financial statement. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad, our cash flow game, is only about how to use a financial statement. That's really all it is. What's an asset? What's a liability? What's income? What's expense? So today we have one of the smartest guys I know. I have read his book. You can ask my wife, Kim. His book was The Great Deformation, The Corruption of Capitalism in America. And that book just opened my eyes as to what's really going on. And our guest today is the great David Stockman. He's the best-selling author, Washington Insider. But more importantly, and this is why I am asking you to listen, he is the former director of the Office of Management and Budget, keyword there, budget, under President Reagan. And under President Reagan, as you know, America went into one of the biggest booms in history. So today, rather than listen to liar politicians and attorneys and all that, we're very blessed here to have David Stockman talking to us about the numbers. Because he's not going to tell you the story, because he reads the numbers. And again, the similarity between Rich Dad and David Stockman is I'd rather see the numbers than the story. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of talk about fake news. And in my opinion, David will give us the real news. And
the numbers. The
politicians and the news, they're all about the fake news. And I was just watching an interview with David, and one of the top financial anchors asked David, she goes, "Oh, but don't you think the economy is improving? The GDP is up, and aren't things going up? And isn't everything getting better?" And David just looked at her straight in the face and said, "No, I don't think it is. I disagree." So I think we're going to get the real story here. So David,
wait. The other thing I love about David Stockman is not only was he director of the Office of Management and the Budget under Reagan, his educational background, he went to Harvard. David, for what?
First of all, I'm glad to be with you, but second, that was a long time ago, and I was a student at the Harvard Divinity School.
Right.
That obviously prepared me for dealing with a world of liars.
Isn't it part of divinity, thou shalt not lie?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the program.
Early and often.
Welcome to the program, David. Great to have you here.
I'm very happy to be back again, and given your liar theme, there couldn't be a better time to talk about what's happening down in Washington. We have fake news, obviously, but I think we also have a fake tax cut.
Yep.
And I know you want to get to that.
Yep.
But if you look at it without getting lost in the weeds and all the details, and it's moving, towards a vote in the Senate, the bill does not cut taxes for 95% of the American people in any meaningful way. If we look at the year 2025, which is, it's fully effective but it's before they do the trick of sunsetting everything, which means it all gets canceled. But if we look at 2025, we find that the lowest 1/5 of families, these are people under 30,000 struggling to stay ahead, get a tax cut by the grand sum of $1.15 a week. And if we go to the second,
yeah,
that's amazing. That'll help a lot. And if we go to the second tier, which is people, 30 million taxpayers in the 20 to 40th percentile, that would be people 30 to 50,000. They're going to get $7 a week. That's enough for 2 cappuccinos and a banana at Starbucks. And even if we go to the broad middle class, this is the heart of the middle class, the 40 to 60th percentile of households, $55,000 to $95,000 a year. Those are the people that make this whole system go, that hold it up. They're going to get the grand sum of $17 a week on average, of which some will have an increase, others will have a larger decrease. But for all 30 million in that sort of heartland of the middle class, it's nothing more than $17 a week. So the point is, what they're trying to do.
Wait, David, let me ask. I hate to laugh, and I don't mean to, do all that. This whole thing. Let me restate your position and what gives you the credibility. Okay, because we have, Trump is a friend of mine. His sons and I are great friends, but he stands up there and he tells everybody, "Yep, we're going to give the middle class a tax cut." What do you say to that? Is he lying or telling the truth?
He is skipping over the details in favor of the grand design. The problem with Donald Trump, and as you know, I supported him, I voted for him, far better than the alternative that we had on the ballot, but nevertheless, he's been there 11 months now, and he has not buckled down, put his nose to the grindstone, and studied the facts, because he's allowed the lobbyists who, swarm around Capitol Hill to write a tax bill in the guise of a stimulus for the broad economy, Main Street, in the guise of a relief for the middle class, to be essentially a giant corporate tax reduction that will go mainly to higher dividends, higher stock buybacks, higher returns to shareholders, which, that's fine for them, but it's not going to do much for economic growth, jobs, or wages, and it's not going to go into the, improved pay packet for the overwhelming share of the middle class. He's just been misled.
Right.
I can't.
Is he being misled or is he lying? I don't really care what you say. I mean, he's been called every name of the book by now. I think they're inventing new names for him. But is he lying?
I don't think Donald Trump ever lies. He just selectively looks at information that makes his case and ignores everything else, okay? And so they did show him that if you find the right person with 2.3 kids with income of $59,200 a year and the standard deduction under the new bill, he'll come out a couple $100 ahead. So they took one example and made that the whole story. But it's not the whole story, because the facts are the facts, and most people are getting trivial cuts by 2025, and then guess what? It all sunsets. It's written in disappearing ink.
What does sunset mean? It doesn't come
It
true?
means that the tax cut, the lower rates that they're talking about, the higher child credit, going from 1,000 to 2,000, which will help a lot of, especially larger families. The higher standard deduction going from $12,000 to $24,000 for each household. All of that disappears January 1, 2026. Okay, it's gone. On the other hand, the corporate tax cut, taking the rate from 35 to 20, is permanent. It stays there in 2026, 2027.
Oh,
and
David,
beyond.
you sweet talking guy, you.
So David,
that makes guys like me very happy.
So David, you're saying that so you're saying basically the lobbyists of Wall Street came up with this plan, and who benefits is Wall Street and big corporations? Is that?
Yes, exactly what I'm saying. Now, first of all, I would agree the corporate tax is a bad tax in theory. If we could get rid of it, we should. We really ought to do like the rest of the world and tax consumption in the form of a value-added tax. But they're not doing that. What they're doing is simply lowering the rate from 35 to 20%. They're borrowing the money, that is, charging the bill to future taxpayers and the middle class that's getting no relief, and arguing that it's going to stimulate the economy into a spurt of growth. My argument is that if you look at it carefully, and if you look at corporate tax cuts in the past, they'll lead mainly, I would say 90% of the savings, and that's $1.3 trillion over 10 years, $180 billion a year by the out years, will go into dividends and stock buybacks and leverage recaps, and in short, it'll get pumped right back into Wall Street, where the fast money traders and the casino gamblers.
And David, that's the reason I love your book, The Great Deformation, The Corruption of Capitalism in America, because it's a big book. I mean, I could use it as a boat anchor. It's so big. But I plowed through it, and you explain in great detail exactly how the smoke and mirrors works, and why my latest book is called Why the Rich Are Getting Richer. But a lot of it has to do with what goes on with the rich and these tax breaks and using corporate debt to boost shares and all this stuff. But the poor and middle class, in technical terms, get screwed. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And here's the point. They're arguing, yes, if you got them in a corner and asked them to, put their hand on the Bible and swear the truth, they would admit, they would admit there isn't really much, dollar reduction going to individual taxpayers in the broad middle class. But that doesn't matter because the big corporate tax rate will cause corporations to invest, and that'll create more output and jobs and wages and so forth. But the problem with that is we now have the lowest cost of capital in recorded history. The Fed and the other central banks have kept interest rates practically at zero for 10 years running. Equity market is out of control, which means you can raise equity capital at the drop of a hat. There's venture capital, flowing from coast to coast into any idea that someone has for a new business. So my point is there is no shortage of cheap capital, equity, or debt anywhere in the United States.
If you know how to use it.
But they're not using it to invest. They're using it to go back into Wall Street and buy back stock. They bought back $5 trillion of stock over the last 10 years.
Amen. I want you guys to understand again, the person we're talking to is David Stockman. He's the former director. He is the insider on the Office of Management and Budget under President Reagan. So you're hearing what's really going on, what's in the news. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about his latest book. It's called Trump, A Nation on the Brink of Ruin and How to Get It Back. But more importantly, if you're middle class, but I don't care where you are in the world right now, I want David to talk about how this is going to affect the world. Because the United States is in trouble, the world's in trouble. And I'm going to talk to him about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin today just went past $10,000. Everybody's been laughing. But also what most people don't know is the buy-in is coming from Japan, because Japan is about 10 years ahead of the United States as far as this quantitative easing and printing money goes. So the Japanese are dumping yen and going into Bitcoin, whereas Americans are dumping dollars and going into the stock market. When we come back, you'll find out what the facts really are.
You're listening to The Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Do you own an LLC or LP? Are you aware of the new rules? The IRS has mandated new audit rules that require every LLC operating agreement and LP limited partnership agreement be amended. This dramatic requirement has never before been experienced, and changes must be made by December 31st. Corporate Direct, owned by Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton, can guide you through these new rules. Call 800-600-1760. That's 800-600-1760. Or visit corporatedirect.com. Contact Corporate Direct today to stay in IRS compliance.
Log on to richdadradio.com while you listen. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And we started this conversation with, President Trump is now talking about a tax cut for the middle class. But I think it's a tax, for the middle class. And the rich will only get richer, which is the whole theme of the Rich Dad Radio Show. Why don't we have financial education? So our guest today is David Stockman. He's a best-selling author. He's a Washington Insider. He's a former director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Reagan. The reason we had David Stockman on here is because being the guy with the budget, he sees the numbers. It's the facts, not the story, not the hype, not the campaign promises. So, Kim, what's your first question to David?
Yes. Well, David, we were talking about the corporate tax rate and lowering it to 20%. And, of course, all the politicians say, oh, this is going to be so great for the American people. It's going to bring back all these jobs. Employment will go up. And I was listening to you on an earlier interview, and you're saying, hey, these companies who are overseas, they're there. I mean, they've got people employed. They've got a lot of infrastructure. They've got investment over there. They're not all of a sudden going to shut down their businesses and bring all these jobs back to America.
Talking about Apple, aren't you?
Well, Apple's one.
Yeah, well, there's several, but yeah, I think it's a great point. And the example I used is IBM. In 1992, IBM had 0 employees in India and 150,000 employees in the United States. Fast forward 22, 23 years, they have 150,000 employees in India and less than 90,000 in the U.S. Now, my point is they went to India because labor costs are dramatically lower. And because they're English-speaking, they could use and train people to work at middle and lower-level jobs in all the tech things that IBM does. It wasn't because of the tax rate. In fact, IBM doesn't pay the 35% rate. Its tax rate in its latest 10Q, its last report to the SEC, was 11%. And the point is, yes, tax. I think the corporate tax is a bad thing. It doesn't work well. It's a relic of the 1950s. But we have to understand it's not the reason that massive amounts of jobs have been offshored, and therefore to expect that just by lowering the rate, they're all going to come surging back here is a delusion. It's not going to happen. They're offshore because of lower labor costs, because they want to be near their suppliers or raw material, or in many cases they have to be in end markets because governments say if you don't make it here, you can't sell it here, and all the rest of it. So what we have is a very simplistic idea. I lower corporate taxes by $1.3 trillion. They're going to spend it all on plant and equipment and technology and hiring and expanding. None of that is true. They're going to spend it on Wall Street, rewarding their shareholders with bigger dividends and more stock buybacks and higher stock prices. So, but the problem, of course, is 90% of the stock is owned by 10% of the households. The beneficiaries will be the 10% and the 1% and the 0.1%. Not, the broad middle class. And this is where I think Trump really got a bum steer and went down the wrong road. He was elected by the working class and by the burned-out districts of the Rust Belt in Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Ohio, and so forth. And they are suffering today because of high payroll taxes. If you have a $50,000 job, between you and the employer, there's $7,500 a year of taxes being paid on the payroll tax. So if you want to help the broad class of citizens, we ought to dramatically cut the payroll tax, because it would do two things. the employee side would end up with more in their paycheck. The employer would have a lower cost, dramatically lower cost of hiring people, and on the margin, they would hire more people in less machines. It's a trade-off.
What you're saying is the same old song, right? The old saw, the rich get richer, and the people, the working class, get screwed.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a whole system. We have a whole system that's geared to that, and we haven't even mentioned the Federal Reserve yet, but that's the heart of the problem. They print massive amounts of money. They put the interest rate down to zero. They spent $3.5 trillion in the bond market buying bonds and Ginnie Mae and Fannie Mae securities. And that basically never got out of the canyons of Wall Street. It simply caused inflation of financial assets. It didn't generate growth in jobs and higher wages and so forth.
But this is my question, because I was reading one of your articles here. See, what saved us in 2007 and 2008 was the Federal Reserve and the Treasury basically printed money, simple terms. And I've now heard that they can't do that anymore. They say the Fed and the Treasury are out of powder. They can't do that. Why is that? Why can't they just keep printing money like Japan is?
Well, the problem is not just printing money, but it's also the interest rate. And they put the interest rate essentially at zero in a panic moment in December 2008. And it has stayed at essentially zero for 102 months ever since then. Nothing like it in recorded history.
Well, Japan went negative, and Switzerland went negative.
Yeah, well, in some parts of Europe and Asia, including Japan, it went negative. In fact, even today, there's $10 trillion worth of government and corporate bonds trading at a negative yield.
Is that a possibility? Is that a possibility here in the U.S. to go negative?
I think we would have riots in the streets. I think they would be coming to Washington with pitchforks and torches if they tried that here, because that is stealing from savers. That's all it is.
But inflation already does that anyway. Why can't the U.S. print more like Japan's printing?
In theory, they could print more, but they have now said, we solved the problem. We've brought you back to full employment. It worked. It was a one-time expedient, and therefore we're going to now begin to shrink the balance sheet, and that's the key thing people don't understand, and that means they're going to be selling bonds back into Wall Street, not buying them by the billions and tens of billions as they did over the last 10 years.
So it's going to depress the bond market then?
Yes, that's going to drive prices down, yields up, and the whole financial system today, and the stock market in particular, is dependent on ultra-low interest rates, because these companies that have been buying back their stock, a lot of them have been borrowing money not to build a plant or expand a store or invest in some software or train employees. They borrowed the money in order to pay a higher dividend.
Correct.
Now, that is an insane economic act. It is just symptomatic of how distorted the whole financial system is.
And as my latest book, again, if I could plug it, Why the Rich Are Getting Richer, that's a huge reason for it. And yet, David, our school system keeps telling people to save money and get out of debt, when you and I know that inflation is running more than 3%, but they don't declare that. So that if you're saving money, even went to the bank, we got 0.01% the other day on savings.
I think it was 0.02.
0.02.
Yeah. Well, I use the example. If someone worked 40 years in a steel factory but was thrifty and saved, every week a substantial amount of his paycheck, didn't try to, live high on the hog
they would have survived.
He would have, after 40 years, I calculated, $350,000, but the return on that would be one cappuccino per day at Starbucks after a lifetime of saving and thrift and sacrifice. So what I'm saying is the whole system is now designed to basically punish savers, punish thrift,
Amen.
and encourage people to borrow until they can't get another loan, and that makes the whole system extremely fragile.
Everybody hear what David Stockman is saying, because for the last 30 years, Kim knows I've been married 30 years. I've been saying savers are losers and debtors are winners, and I almost got hung on the cross for saying that.
That came out in Rich Dad Poor Dad. Savers are losers, and you got annihilated.
Yeah, a society that borrows and borrows and borrows and doesn't save is going to bury itself in debt and have a crisis like there's no tomorrow.
But that's but David, that's the next subject I want to bring up with you. A lot of things I want to bring up with you, like Bitcoin and Japan.
Sure.
The point here is that I think we're on the road to ruin, and people are doing the same things. So that's why you're the guy today, because you are David Stockman. You're the director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Reagan, and everybody else is lying. So that's why we want people to listen to you, and that's why the time on this radio program is so important. When we come back, we're asking even bigger questions like, why is Japan buying Bitcoin? And what's happening in Germany, because Bitcoin is the yen and Germany is the euro.
You're listening to The Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Advisors have a great gift for you. Visit RichDadAdvisors.com and receive 5 free reports on business and investing success. 5 free reports that can help you right now. And while there, check out the Author's Choice audio series. Audio is a great way to learn. And for as little as 99 cents, you can download key chapters from all the Rich Dad Advisor books. You can listen to The Myths and Magic of Real Estate Investing, 7 Steps to Limited Liability, The 4 Pillars of Investing, Team Code of Honor, or The Psychology of Debt, among other great audios. For pennies, you can power up your skills for getting out of the rat race. So please visit RichDadAdvisors.com for your 5 free reports and your powerful and affordable audio chapters. That's RichDadAdvisors.com for great information that can help you right now.
This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android, and all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. And we archive them so you can listen to this again, because you'll learn even more, because it's a very important program. But more importantly, you can share this with friends, family, and business associates, because we're talking to one of the smartest guys I know right now. He is an insider from Washington. He's the former director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Reagan. And what he's saying now is people are lying and lying and lying. And the reason we're on this program is because my friend, the great Donald, is saying, well, we're going to have a tax cut for the middle class. And we all know that's a lie. Everybody knows that's a lie. But they'll do anything to get a vote. And the worst thing about it is, as David Stockman says, he is actually screwing the people that got him into office. The flyover states like Wisconsin, Ohio, and all, the working class. All the guys that went to school and got a job and paying taxes and saving money and getting out of debt, you're getting hammered because everything has changed. So David Stockman is the author of Trump, A Nation on the Brink of Ruin and How to Bring It Back. That's pretty optimistic. And the Great Defamation, the Corruption of Capitalism in America. And his website is David Stockman's ContraCorner.com.
And I want to
subscribe to that.
Yeah, the company does. I really want to recommend your newsletter, David, Contra Corner.
Oh, thank you.
ContraCorner.com.
Yes.
Lots of great information.
Fabulous.
Yeah,
we talk about these kind of issues every day. So
right, everybody, please subscribe to it, because otherwise you can listen to the lies out there.
Yep. And speaking of lies, David, we're hearing from politicians, we're hearing from all the news stations. Oh, the economy's doing so well, it's bounced back. Stock market's all-time highs. GDP is up. Everything's rosy. And you're saying, no, it's not.
Well, 3 things. One, the stock market is in a great giant bubble, the biggest bubble yet. It's caused by the Fed and central banks all over the world. So that doesn't prove the economy is healthy. It only proves that they've printed massive amounts of money, which has basically stayed in the canyons of Wall Street and fueled this enormous speculative mania. That's the first point.
Isn't that bubble now blowing up in Bitcoin? I don't know if it's true or not, but
Bitcoin is,
bubble.
I mean, it's the bubble of all bubbles. I want to be careful about what I say because the theory of a private money that can't be manipulated and managed and controlled by the state or the government or, the central bank is a good idea. And maybe in the long run, there is some real future to this. In fact, if you go before 1900 or 1860, we basically had private money in the United States, and we had a prosperous economy. The problem today, though, is there's so much speculative mania built into the system from all of this money printing and stimulus that what we have is a speculation that, like I've never seen in my lifetime. This thing has doubled in a month. It's been going up by a couple $1,000s a day. Nothing in the world creates that much value.
I laughed at my friend when he bought at 400. Now he's laughing at me.
Yeah, well, when it's back to 400, you might be even. And I think,
but the point here is
there's a very real possibility. I mean, people were saying the same thing at the .com. Well, why don't we ever learn? In March 2000, the NASDAQ 100 was at 4,500. It had gone up sixfold in 40 months, and guess what? 2 years later, it was back to where it started at 1,200. People lost 80% of their money. Everybody's forgot about that. The same thing happened in 2007 and 2008. The S&P was, stock index was at 1570, and 8 or 9 months later, it was down to 670. People lost 60% of their money. In other words, what happens is they blow these bubbles. They take 6, 5, 6, 7 years to fully inflate. They finally reach the point of absurdity. A black swan comes along, or orange swan, if you want to consider Donald Trump an orange swan, or a red swan, because I think China is the next shoe to fall. And then all of a sudden, people start selling, and the whole bubble collapses.
But David, this is the best. This is the best time because this is when guys like you and I get rich because that's when all the it all comes apart. And this is the part of the Rich Dad Show is all bubbles bust. And instead of being depressed right now, I would be excited about this thing. The United States government is due to be shut down in a few days because the U.S. is broke. We're out of money. What are they going to do?
Well, we're absolutely broke, and that goes to your question. If everything is booming like they say, why did we have nearly a $700 billion deficit last year, and why is the federal deficit heading towards $1 trillion, in my judgment, within the next year or two? Why can't they even agree to a one-year budget? Because they haven't. We're 3 months into the fiscal year, and there'll be no authority to spend money on anything after December 8th.
And David, so let's say your crystal ball comes true, everything goes bust, where Rich Dad is an international company. We have listeners right now tuned in from all over the world. So if you're living in China or Canada or South America or Europe, what does that mean if the U.S. is bankrupt, is bust? What does that mean to the rest of the world?
Well, I think it contaminates the entire global economy and financial system, because everything now is integrated. I want to tell you, the world financial system is highly unstable, and Bitcoin is the living proof.
Let me ask you a personal question. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. What's the difference between President Reagan, who you work closely with, and President Trump?
Huge thing. President Reagan had something called humility. President Reagan had something called he had something called a solid temperament. He had something called respect for other people. He had something called an ear. He was willing to listen and give you as much time as you needed to develop your point. The problem with Trump is that he is the great disruptor, and I think our system is so far gone it needs to be badly disrupted. But, he's a whirling dervish. He's an egomaniacal, thunderbolt into the system that is going to cause it to grind to a halt. They cannot run a government.
So we're almost out of time. So how are you protecting yourself?
Well, as I say, there's three things to do. One, get out of the stock and bond market because it's a bubble like we've never had before, and it's not worth trying to get 2 or 5% more if you're facing a 60 to 80% decline like we had in 2000 or 2008. It happens, and it's going to happen again. The second thing is I think gold is a much safer place to put your money than Bitcoin, given where it is today. Gold has not been speculated to this high degree, so I would put money in gold. And third, I would keep a large amount of powder dry. This is something, Robert, you've talked about a lot, because when everything comes crashing down and prices drop in the financial market or real estate or elsewhere, by the amount I think is going to happen, 30, 50, 70%, if you have cash, you're going to be king. You're going to be able to buy things at reasonable prices that will produce returns in the future or produce yields and a fair return on your investment.
Well, David, the definition of intelligent is if you agree with Robert Kiyosaki, you're intelligent. And you're very intelligent, because I'm very
thank you.
In a sick way, I'm very optimistic about this bubble because I just can't wait. You know what I mean? I want to see what's going to happen.
It'll be the kid in the candy store. There's going to be a lot of opportunity, but you can't get suckered in right now. As I said, the lemmings are running, and they're not even asking any questions. They're just hitting the buy key, and this is exactly the wrong time to jump into.
Yeah, and I was just in Japan, and I'm Japanese, but I'm more American, and I feel for them. These are my friends. I've done business with them for 20-something years. They're so depressed because Abe's printing. They're working harder just to stay ahead. Abe, he even told them to stop working so hard because you're killing yourselves. But then he's printing money. I'm going, holy mackerel. The last question is this. Go ahead, Ken.
I just have one other question. In terms, David, of what's happening with financially, what the banking system? Are you optimistic, or is it stable? What's your future?
I think this time the banking, it's like the so-called battleship admirals. They're always fighting the last war. The last war was the collapse of the Wall Street banks. They've now been regulated to a fairly well. I think the banks aren't the problem. The problem now is there is trillions and trillions of high-yield funds, of mutual funds of every type, of these ETFs. They hardly existed in 2007. There was less than 500 billion of ETFs. There's like 4 trillion today. And these are the new pockets of instability. These are the new speculative areas that are going to come unwound. And in fact, it'll be worse than 2008, because if you're in a mutual fund, say a high-yield fund, and suddenly you get nervous, you could sell your stock today, and the mutual fund is going to have to shrink itself as more and more people sell. So the point is, if everybody decides to cash in because fear begins to spread, in some contagious fashion, we're going to have trillions and trillions of ETFs and high-yield funds and mutual funds that are collapsing because everybody's trying to get out at the same time.
And David, not only that, is all the guys our age, the baby boomers, talk about the wrong time to retire.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what's really tragic. So once again, David, I'd love to have you back. It's
Thank you,
always
David.
You're a very intelligent
Okay.
guy because you
Ton
agree
of
with me.
information.
Well, listen, I enjoyed very much, and we'll talk soon.
Thank
Update
you.
on where
Always-
this whole
always love your
mess
input.
is going. Okay.
Okay, we would love that. Thank you.
Okay.
So
Very
thank you.
good. Thank you. Bye.
So
Bye-bye.
we come back. We're going to the next popular part of our program. It's Ask Robert. But once again, I want to thank David Stockman. And his website is David Stockman's ContraCorner.com.
Great newsletter. Great
it's-
newsletter. Contra Corner.
It's worth the listening to. We'll be right back with Ask Robert.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Do you own an LLC or LP? Are you aware of the new rules? The IRS has mandated new audit rules that require every LLC operating agreement and LP limited partnership agreement be amended. This dramatic requirement has never before been experienced, and changes must be made by December 31st. Corporate Direct, owned by Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton, can guide you through these new rules. Call 800-600-1760. That's 800-600-1760. Or visit corporatedirect.com. Contact Corporate Direct today to stay in IRS compliance.
Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Advisors have a great gift for you. Visit RichDadAdvisors.com and receive 5 free reports on business and investing success. 5 free reports that can help you right now. And while there, check out the Author's Choice audio series. Audio is a great way to learn. And for as little as 99 cents, you can download key chapters from all the Rich Dad Advisor books. You can listen to The Myths and Magic of Real Estate Investing, 7 Steps to Limited Liability, The 4 Pillars of Investing, Team Code of Honor, or The Psychology of Debt, among other great audios. For pennies, you can power up your skills for getting out of the rat race. So please visit RichDadAdvisors.com for your 5 free reports and your powerful and affordable audio chapters. That's RichDadAdvisors.com for great information that can help you right now.
Your financial education continues. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Radio Show.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Once again, you listen to the program on Rich Dad Radio, anywhere, anytime, on your schedule, iTunes or Android. And all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them because sometimes you learn more the second time you listen to it, but more importantly, have your friends, family, or business associates listen to this program and discuss it, because then you'll learn even more, because discussion is one of the best ways to learn, because they're all different points of view. And now we're going to the most popular part of our program. It's called Ask Robert. And you can go to richdadradio.com for your questions. But before we do that, I want to thank David Stockman. Again, he's a best-selling author, Washington Insider. But more than that, he's a former director of Office of Management and Budget under President Ronald Reagan. He's the author of Trump, A Nation on the Brink of Ruin and How to Bring It Back, The Great Deformation, The Corruption of Capitalism in America. And his website is David Stockman's ContraCorner.com. Our whole company subscribes to it, as a bunch of other newsletters, because we don't want to listen to fake news and liars. And we started this whole program. This is, how do you know when a politician is lying? It's when their lips are moving. And they'll say anything, just to get you to believe them. So that's why I like David Stockman. He's the Office of the Budget. And Rich Dad, the Rich Dad Company, is about income statements and balance sheets, and can you read them? And as you know, most people can't. Most people don't even have one. And we wonder why you're in trouble. Comments, Kim?
Yeah, one thing I would recommend is with David Stockman, I would listen to this show again and again and again. There was a ton of information. And one thing when we talk about fake news and real news, David has the facts. And when I'm watching all these financial programs,
at the numbers.
Yeah, he sees what's really going on. Because when I'm watching all these news programs and all the politicians saying everything's great, the economy's up, the GDP is up, unemployment is down, and he's saying, hey, wait, that's not what's really happening. So you guys really got to wake up, and I really recommend listening to the show again and again. As David said, the 3 things right now to do in his recommendation: number 1, get out of the stock market; number 2, invest in gold; and number 3, he said, keep your powder dry, meaning keep cash. Great,
more than
great
cash,
interview.
I mean, you should be ready for what's coming. And You know, a lot of people think I'm a pessimist, but I'm actually an optimist because I know it's going to crash. Now, to you, it's good or bad. I think it's wonderful. Now, unfortunately, there's all those people who still believe in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, and they're going to get pounded, as they should, because they actually believe in the Easter Bunny and politicians. I mean, that's what happens when you don't get the facts. And what I'll say it again is the reason Kim and I created the cash flow game back in 1996 is you can understand how a financial statement works. The word in there is cash flow. Cash flow are the two most important words in business, but most people have no cash flow because it's flowing out, not flowing in. And so that's my latest book, Why the Rich Are Getting Richer. One of the reasons the rich get richer is taxes flow into my asset column. I use debt, Kim and I use debt to acquire assets, and we reinvest constantly. We're not in the stock market. We wouldn't go there. We're not in the bond market. We're not in ETFs. Those are for average people. Rich Dad is not for average people. And those of you listening to this program are not average, but you still have to understand income, expense, asset, liability, and cash flow. Basic systems. And that's why David Stockman, being from Reagan's Office of Management and Budget under President Reagan, he sees the numbers. And most of these guys are just moving their lips. So we're going to ask Robert, but before we do, Kim and I met with a friend of mine. He is an investor in Bitcoin, an early investor, and he's going to be our guest on the Rich Dad Show because he's made fortunes in Bitcoin. Fortunes. So when I talk to people, I don't talk to people who are speculators. His name is Landon. He was early into the market, and he's made fortunes. But the interesting thing, he was rich before he invested in Bitcoin. And so if you're going to learn something from here, you better be careful who you listen to. So with that, Melissa, what's your first question for Ask Robert?
Our first question today, Robert, comes from Rebecca in Midland, Texas. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What do you think of the gradual abolishment of cash? Is it real and imminent in your opinion?
It's already happened. I mean, wake up and smell the roses. It's already happened. There's no cash in your banks. Is that everything today is actually digital. There's cyber money, which is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all that. But today money is digital. There's no money in the bank. That's why they're so terrified of there being a run on the bank, because what they do is it's called a fractional reserve system. You deposit $1 in the bank, right? But the bank will lend out $10. So you deposit that $10 on another bank, and they lend out now $100. There's no cash. There's no cash. That's why there's FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, that in case there's a run on the bank in America is $250,000. So Kim and I don't keep anything above $250,000 in a bank because that's the insurance line on it. Now, the trouble with Bitcoin is if you lose it, you lost it. There's nobody going to back you up. The same as gold. If you lose it, there's no government backing you up. So cash has its advantages and its disadvantages, but there is no cash in the system. We are cashless. I mean, I use my credit card more than cash. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, I mean, try pulling a couple $1,000s out of a bank today. They give you the third degree. They want to know why you're doing it. They want proof. It's crazy. You cannot get your own cash out of a bank these days. Airlines. We travel a lot on airlines. Airlines do not accept cash. It's got to be credit card if you're going to buy some food online.
That's digital money, and
It's
Bitcoin is cyber money. Just know the differences.
And I was just in Estonia doing a women's event. Estonia, they do not use cash. Everything is credit card. Everything.
China does not use cash.
Yep.
America is so far behind the times. You have no idea. You have no idea because the advantage that Kim and I have is we travel the world and we see how Americans live in this bubble. You know, we're the greatest. We're number one. Well, that was a long time ago, sports fans.
And I'll tell you one other thing about the banks is last year we had a company bonus for everybody and we wanted to give them cash. We had to go to 5 different banks. This was not a ton of money. We had to go to 5 different banks because banks did not have physical cash on their premises. It's crazy.
And they want to get rid of cash because the government can't control it.
They can't track it.
They don't want $100 bills because, you know, drug dealers, pimps, and prostitutes use them. And so they want to get rid of the $100 bill. Now, that's why they're kind of happy with credit card because they can track you. The trouble with Bitcoin, it's non-centralized money. So the cash comes from central banks like the Fed and the Euro and the Bank of Japan or the PBOC of China. But Bitcoin is people's money. And so I'm watching as to what's going to happen when the government finally realizes they lost control of money. And guys like, blockchain, cyber money, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all that. So the point here is the Rich Dad Radio Show is designed for people who want to understand. If you're looking for answers, talk to a financial planner. They're going to tell you to save money, get out of debt, invest for long-term in the stock market, buy stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. You want to do that, knock yourself out, trust your financial planner. But of course, they won't pay you if they're wrong. You have to pay yourself if you're wrong. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Jenny in Taiwan. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. She says, "Hi, Robert. I just listened to your show with Jim Rickards, and I do feel the urge to get prepared myself. But how do you recommend me to buy precious metals? How do rich people store it in a secured way?"
Well, that's a very good question, but you better find out your own way, because Kim and I have been buying gold and silver for years and years and years. And if you only have like a couple 100,000, you can hide it because it doesn't take up much space. But when you start going past hundreds of thousands of dollars in gold and silver, you got to find professional places outside of banks.
Outside of banks. That's what Jim Rickards says. Do not store it in a bank.
And that's the reason you should not hang out with poor people, because poor people don't know where those places are. I won't take the name of our places. We have several places all over the world where rich people hide real wealth. It's not held in banks. They're private vaults. Private vaults. So you got to find rich people who will tell you where these and private vaults are and who they are. But you have to do your own due diligence, your own research into it. But you only have 100,000 in gold. That's not much money today, because it's 100 coins or something. No, 50 coins. It's not much. You can hide it under your mattress if you want. But the moment you start going beyond that, you've really got to be thinking like a rich person. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Weston in San Francisco. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It says, "Why do you support the gold standard? I agree with your points against the fractional reserve system. However, returning to the gold standard will lead to a minority of investors buying up a controlling interest and holding nations hostage. Is it not just better to limit fiat currency creation to governments rather than central banks and retail banks?"
Hey, that's a great idea. You should just go and do that. You should just go and do that. You should also stop global warming. You know what I mean? Why don't you do that too? What I really get disgusted and I'll bark at this guy, why talk about things you cannot do? The question is, what can you do? We're not on the gold standard. So what does that mean? I buy gold. Now, I can sit there and debate Trump and say, let's get back on the gold standard and let's get rid of the Fed and all this stuff. But it's a waste of my time. And the trouble with most people who are the academic types, they talk about things they can never do. Why don't you solve cancer? Why don't you go and, we should all get together and end cancer. We should all get together and end global warming. Yeah. Go do it. No, I can't do it. Unless you talk about it. And that's the trouble this whole world today is too many people went to school, and you can talk about stuff, but you don't have to do stuff. That's why we have people who are liars out there. They talk about stuff. They don't have to prove it. That's why the Rich Dad Company has a cash flow game, the financial statements and all this, because you can talk to my accountants and my bankers. I can prove I have the money. Most people can't. They're just liars. Final comments, Kim.
Well, final comment to that is, we talk about we have fake teachers and we have real teachers. So at Rich Dad, we have real teachers. And our teachers, our advisors, our Rich Dad advisors are people that are doing this every single day. So Kenny, our real estate advisor, he's in real estate every single day. Tom, our tax advisor, deals with taxes every single day. We want to deal with real teachers who are doing, if there's something I want to learn from someone who's doing that every single day. I want to find real teachers, not fake teachers.
Thank you for listening to Rich Dad. You can submit your questions to AskRobert at richdadradio.com. And thank you to David Stockman, and thank you to all listening to this program.
Bye.